Contrary to popular belief, the goth subculture is not just a fashion statement defined by black nail polish and dark attire. It's a creative interpretation of what some may consider the darker aspects of the psyche that are, in reality, integral parts of the human experience that deserve more introspection. Let's take a brief journey through goth's major influences, quintessential works, and its legacy. One of the earliest influences on the goth aesthetic is the 1931 film Dracula, with Bela Lugosi's iconic portrayal of the vampire. The archetype of which would be recycled by innovators of the genre, as the erotic vampire figure parallels that of the rock star, whose image and art, despite the passage of time, remains an eternal presence. This connection would later be reflected in Bauhaus's first single in 1979, Bela Lugosi's Dead. Motifs of alienation, psychedelia, existentialism, the avant-garde, and the brooding, almost romantic atmosphere of both the Velvet Underground and the Doors in the late 1960s would provide a few colors to the monochrome palette of later goth music. In fact, the Doors were described as gothic in 1967 by critic John Stickney in a review for the Williams Record, who noted that their violence and nihilism stood in stark contrast to the optimism of the hippie counterculture. Bowie's extraterrestrial Ziggy Stardust persona was another key influence, introducing androgyny, decadence, reinvention, and theatricality. Goth began to emerge in 1976 with the convergence of punk and glam rock. The legendary 1976 Sex Pistols concert at Manchester's Lesser Free Trade Hall is often cited as a catalyst, influencing members of bands like Joy Division and Susie and the Banshees. The sound of goth congealed in the early 80s as a distinct sound, with albums like Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, Bauhaus's In the Flat Field, Susie and the Banshees' Kaleidoscope, and The Cure's Pornography. The sound of goth congealed in the early 80s as a distinct sound. The distinct sound of goth congealed in the early 80s with albums like Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, Bauhaus's In the Flat Field, Susie and the Banshees' Kaleidoscope, and The Cure's Pornography. By 1982, the goth sound had gained such wide appeal that the Batcave Club opened its doors to London's freaks and weirdos, a place free from judgment where the spirit of Halloween was celebrated nightly. Later in the decade, The Cure's Disintegration album in 1989 marked a return to their darker roots after a more pop-oriented. Later in the decade, The Cure's Disintegration album in 1989 marked a return to their darker roots after a more pop-oriented phase, and would signal the waning of the goth movement, as the genre would split into subgenres in the coming years. In 1993 and 94, respectively, gothic metal band Typo Negative released Bloody Kisses, and industrial band 9 Inch Nails released The Downward Spiral, both merging goth's macabre sound with a much heavier sound. In 1993 and 94, respectively, gothic metal band Typo Negative released Bloody Kisses, and industrial band 9 Inch Nails released The Downward Spiral, both merging goth's macabre with a much heavier sound. Today, goth's influence remains quite prevalent. Contemporary artists like The Weeknd, Drab Majesty, and Boy Harsher continue to draw inspiration from the genre's foundations, blending its melancholic sound with modern innovations. The Weeknd has sampled Susie and the Banshees and Cocteau Twins, Drab Majesty channels Bowie's otherworldliness, and Boy Harsher merges synth-punk with Lynchian atmospheres. Goth as both a musical genre and cultural movement is deeply interwoven with a web of creative Goth as both a musical genre and cultural movement is deeply interwoven with a web of shared creative ideologies that have sparked Goth as both a musical genre and cultural movement is deeply interwoven with a web of shared creative ideologies that have sparked a continuous cycle of reinvention that extends into nightclubs across the globe, fashion, and film. The genre's exploration of life's darker themes continues to provide a lens through which contemporary artists and audiences may both confront and embrace the complexities of the human experience.